In the mid-1990s, I was doing property preservation, securing foreclosed houses throughout New England. I would be on the road for 3 days straight, sometimes in rural Maine. I would stay in the house I was at the end of a 14-hour day to save money on a hotel. This one house in Hampton, Maine. Keep in mind these homes have no utilities, all have been disconnected. This one house is a former large turn-of-the-century farmhouse, remarkably clean with fresh paint. I would seek out the higher rooms, usually the second floor, because the day's warmth would stay in those rooms longer. Even in the summer, the nights can get brisk. Anyway, this night I fell asleep about 9 p.m., and suddenly, I was awakened by the sound of banging on the front door downstairs. I was not in a good mood, being very tired from the day's labor, and I hurried down expecting to see the sheriff, and I would show the work order and explain my reason for being there, and he'd be on his way. Only, there was no one there. I went back upstairs. This time I was thinking I was more tired than I thought, and wasn't happy being awoken from a sound sleep, by my imagination, so I thought. A few minutes later, just as I was falling asleep again, there was the banging again. I sat up, and surely someone was banging on the front door. I yelled out hello, and the banging stopped, and again, I head to the front door and no one? I walked around the rural property, no one. Now I'm fully awake and not happy, but still not thinking of anything supernatural, so up to bed. I was sleeping on the floor in a sleeping bag, but now I had one eye open and both ears. Then the banging started again. I listened, then shouted out, "What do you want?" The banging stopped at the downstairs front door, and then started right at my wall in my room without missing a beat. Needless to say, the hair stood up on my neck. I grabbed my stuff and beat it out of there. My name is Amber, and I'm almost 22 years old. I've always been a firm believer in ghosts, but was never a believer in evil entities. So the first time I saw a shadow being, I thought it was just my imagination playing tricks on me. It was the spring of 2007 when the first encounter occurred. I was working on a short story for my high school science fiction class when I suddenly felt like something in the room had changed. Something wasn't right. I couldn't detect anything, so I just shrugged it off as having an overactive imagination and went back to writing. Again, the feeling came back, and I was overwhelmed with dread. So I turned around, looking all around the room, and that's when I noticed it. Huddling in the corner, it was black, short, no distinct features really. I saw it reach out its hands, and I screamed at it to go away, and it sank into the other shadows in the room. Shadows that were obviously made by the light shining on objects. That was my first encounter with the shadow beings. The second encounter occurred about 2 years later. It was a bright sunny day in summer. I was in bed with the fan on, trying to beat the heat. I decided to call my friend Katie because I was bored and wanted someone to talk to. Our conversation didn't last long because she had to get ready for work, so there I was again, with nothing to do. I was about to reach for a book when I noticed something near my window. I thought it might be a kid blocking the window, but this thing, it seemed to have materialized out of nowhere. It was like a giant blob with no form. At the blink of an eye, it was just gone. It had me running out of my room in fear, and I definitely didn't want to sleep in there for quite a while. My last encounter occurred months before I moved into my own place. I was watching TV in the dark upstairs, a horror movie of course. I had to pause the movie because it suddenly became chilling in the living room, and I went to grab a pillow and blanket, wanting to keep warm and also deciding that I would sleep upstairs that evening. Some comfort thing that I've had since I was a kid after I've watched a horror movie. It makes me feel safe knowing that my parents are in the next room. Well, when I came back upstairs, I noticed that there was something huddled in the corner. I thought it was my sister Santana because she always made her way upstairs to the living room because she thought her room was too cold to sleep in. As I approached the corner, I realized it wasn't her, but one of the shadow beings that I'd seen before. As quickly as I noticed it wasn't my sister, it had disappeared, as if evaporating. These shadow beings are not just a figment of my imagination. They're not my eyes playing tricks on me because of the way the room is lit. The shadows are pure black and look as if they could be solid. Sometimes they take the shape of a human, sometimes they are shapeless, or at least in my experience with them, that's what has happened. I don't know why it targeted me to be able to see it, or where it even came from, and if it's still in that house. My whole family moved away, and I'm in an apartment on the opposite side of town with no shadow being encountered for at least 9 months. I do know that my mind was telling me that this thing was evil and something bad would happen if I stayed there with my family any longer. So I immediately began searching for an apartment after the last encounter, finally freeing me once moving into my own place. I was, and still am, glad to be free of whatever it was that was haunting me. This story has never been heard by anyone. I chose not to say anything because I know what happens when you tell someone you have seen a demon. 7 years ago, when I was just 12 years old, something happened to me that I'll never forget. My life was altered that cold, windy night. A few friends and I were playing hide and seek, like little most boys do. The neighbors did not care if we played in their yard, and there was a church next to that. We had plenty of room to play a good game of hide and seek, flashlight edition. It just so happened that it was my turn to be the seeker. I had given everyone approximately 4 minutes to hide. We counted in the garage with the door securely shut. My 4 minutes were about up, so I began my quest to find my friends, but that was not what I found at all. I started going towards the church in search of them, but then doubled back. I was hoping I would catch them quick. I started walking down the tree line in my friend's backyard. This was approximately 50 yards from the garage where I started. I heard some rustling in the woods, so I knew I had found someone. Slowly creeping up on the sound, all I could see was the branches and tree trunks. Going deeper and deeper into the woods, I began to feel like someone was watching me, but I knew it was not my friends. I just sensed like it was something else, so I started to get out of there, fast. I finally was out of the woods, and then I started to walk even further down the tree line. I heard that same noise again, so of course, I went back in to see what it was. I probably walked 15 feet into the woods again, and that's when I saw it. My flashlight was aimed at the ground so I could see where I was going. The noise was about 15 feet in front of me. I slowly lifted my light upwards. I began to see strange gray feet, legs, and a back. I dropped my light instantly. With only the moon as my light, I saw the shadow turn around. Standing motionless in front of me was a creature that I had only seen in horror films. It was about 6'6". I can only describe this thing as being a demon. It had wings that were tucked behind itself because I saw them before I dropped my flashlight. His arms were at his side. I could not make out any facial features very well. I hate to sound cliche, but it did have glowing red eyes. It was a very faint glow, but a glow nonetheless. At this point, I was frozen with fear. All I knew was I had to get out of there. I slowly began to step backwards, trying not to make a sound, but I knew my cover was blown. It still remained motionless as I was doing this. I was almost out now, and I could hear sticks breaking, so I knew it was moving. When I heard that, I started running out of there. I was standing in the backyard now when I heard this loud swooping noise, like a giant bird taking off. I turned around and saw the most incredible thing I had ever seen in my life. This great creature was flying towards the moon, and I could see its very large wingspan. It disappeared very quickly. I was standing in the middle of a lawn, speechless, looking at the sky. I forgot we were even playing hide and seek at this point. I just walked back to the house and sat on the steps. Maybe 10 minutes later, my friends came walking up asking me what I was doing. I guess they saw me sitting there from their hiding spot. They thought I had given up or something. I told them I was not feeling very well, not letting them in on what I had seen. So we all went back inside. The rest of the night, all I could think about was that creature. What was it? What did it want? Where did it come from? These were the things I was thinking of. The next day, I decided to draw, as best I could, what I saw. A few years ago, I was reading a story that I saw and stumbled upon. It was about people who had seen some pretty weird things, and this thing sounded like what I saw that night 7 years ago. What really gave me goosebumps, and I'm getting them now for just thinking about it, is there was a drawing that the witness had drawn. It looked exactly what I drew. There were a few more stories about this creature with even more drawings that looked like mine. They called this thing Mothman. Now, I do not know if what I saw was the same thing all these other people saw, but I do know I saw something that I cannot fully explain. I do not plan on telling my friends or family about this because they would laugh at me. I know what I saw, and that is all that matters to me. It was the summer of '09. It started on a bright sunny Friday afternoon. It was nice out and my day off, so I decided to take a walk downtown and go to the bookstore. I spent a good few minutes just browsing until I got to the paranormal section. On the top shelf in the left corner, I found it. It was an old, thin, dusty book that had the word witchcraft printed on it. No author's name or date of being published. It was priced $9, so I thought, why not, and I bought it. I went to a convenience store, got a few snacks, and then plopped myself down on my favorite seat in town. It was right by the old movie theater. Had a view of Main Street, the bridge, and you could still see the sky. I made myself comfortable and opened the book. The first page was blank. The second page had the title of the book, but the third page was, well, strange. It said introduction and had a weird boarding around the page, and then a short paragraph. It was in Latin or something, and I struggled to pronounce it, but I made it to the next page. I can't really remember what it said, but the second after I turned the page, I will never forget. The sky went from bright blue and sunny to dark gray and gloomy. A huge gust of wind swooped down and blew the book straight out of my hand. Lightning flashed and several big bangs of thunder boomed. I was so focused on the strange sky activity that I didn't notice the book had completely disappeared. The dark clouds seemed to almost spin in a vortex. I was thinking a tornado, but then it started to pour rain, and then the rain turned to hail, and it did that for quite some time. I was stuck on the bench for about an hour waiting for it to let up. I had no phone, and I was wearing a tank top and capris and flip-flops, and it had turned so cold. The hail was about a quarter size, and I couldn't get anywhere. I was lucky that part of the roof hung over my head, so I didn't get hit. When it finally let up, I looked for the book, but could never find it, so I headed home kind of bummed because the sky was still so dark, and it looked as if it was going to storm for a while. I'd planned on going camping that weekend. I took my usual route home, but was kind of wanting to turn around and take a different route. The usual route was a road I would take home coming from my friend's house. I had a bad experience there with shadow people the year before this. I took that way anyways, but walked cautiously. The wind was still howling, but I didn't mind. I love the wind when it blows through my hair. It almost seemed as if the wind was speaking to me at this point. It was whispering in my ear. It sounded like the words that were on the page of the book, too. I could hear the wind so clearly, and then it hit me. Why is it so quiet? There was no one anywhere. The street was empty. No cars, no kids. Even if it was raining, kids in the neighborhood would have puddle jumping contests. It was abandoned, completely deserted. When I got home, the lights wouldn't work and no one was there. I got to my room and got my cell phone and was going to call my mother, but it was dead and I had no way to charge it. It didn't seem strange to me that the power would be out after the freak storm, but it was weird that no one was home. Eventually I drifted off, and the next day when I woke up, my alarm went off. It was really weird because my alarm clock is electric, and there was a power outage and it shouldn't be working. I could hear people in the kitchen, so I ventured in there to question their whereabouts last night. They say they didn't know what I was talking about. They were home the whole time. I was really confused, so then I proceeded to talk about the freak storm, and they looked at me with a puzzled look on their faces. They said that it was sunny all day yesterday. I walked away laid back down thinking, this must be a dream. I closed my eyes, pinched myself, and I felt it, then reopened my eyes and sat up. I was really confused. Maybe yesterday was a dream, and today is actually Friday. I grabbed my phone, and it turned on this time. I could have sworn it was dead earlier. I looked at the date, and it said Saturday. I then put my phone on my dresser, really confused now. I turned around ready to go back to bed, but then I stopped, turned around again, and there it was. That book was on my dresser. I opened it, but every page was blank. Right then, my mom walked in and asked what was wrong. She said I came home yesterday with that book in my hand 20 minutes or so after leaving and went straight to bed and slept the whole day and had just woken up now. I left the house at 1 p.m. the day before, came back around 1:30 p.m., and slept until 10 a.m. the next day. That's 20 and a half hours straight. What the hell happened that day? I was never really sure of, but I burned that book a few days later. I took it to my friend's house and burned it in a bonfire. It burned pretty quickly, and the smoke from it was black as the night sky. I'm not really sure if I want to know what happened that day. To this day, It still seems as if the wind speaks to me. As a young boy of 13, I lived on a farm in southern England next to the River Arun. Being the oldest with two brothers and sisters, I naturally became the babysitter of them when my parents would go out on a Friday night. It was on one of those Friday nights that I experienced a paranormal experience. I just put my brothers and sisters to bed, made myself a cup of tea, put another log on the fire, and just sat down to read a book. We had no TV or video games back then, when I heard a faint laughing and whispering sound coming from the upstairs. I got up from the chair and yelled, "If you kids don't knock it off, I'm coming up there with the paddle." Then there was a silence, and a smile came on my face, and I sat down to read my book. Half an hour later, I could hear it again. This time, I grabbed the paddle, and as soon as I started to go up the staircase, I suddenly froze. At the top of the landing was a transparent figure of a man, dressed as an 18th century pirate, including sword and dagger in his belt. In his right hand, he was holding a goblet and was drinking from it. He then turned and looked straight at me, lifting his goblet in a salute, and started that laugh again, and slowly disappeared through the wall behind him. I ran straight upstairs and into my brothers and sisters' room, where they were all sound asleep. I told my mom and dad about this when they got home, and they just laughed and told me the story of how the farm was an inn back in the late 1700s, and that pirates would come up the River Arun from the English Channel to hide from the British Navy. This one pirate was caught and hanged on an oak tree just outside the inn, and every now and again would show himself to have a little fun. This was a ghost story that my late father-in-law told me nearly 20 years ago. His story goes back some 20 years before that he mentioned his ghostly tale to me. Around 1975, he was working as a bus driver in and around Durham area. But this story is not about him, rather a good friend of his, who too was a bus driver for the same bus company. On a late summer's evening, around about 10 p.m., my father-in-law's friend, who was called Peter, was making his way back to the depot down the country lanes of Durham. He was driving a single-decker bus. The bus had a door for entry and a door further along the bus for passengers to exit the bus. The bus was empty of passengers, as it was his last run back towards the bus office depot. As he was driving along, he noticed a young lady at a bus stop with her hand out as though she was attempting to flag the bus. Peter dully obliged and opened the bus door for the young lady to step into the bus. The young girl was approximately 20 to 24, looking from how Peter described her. She was, however, in a state of dishevelment and was crying. Peter apparently asked the girl if she was heading back towards Durham City Center. The young woman replied yes. As she was crying and upset, Peter allowed her on the bus for free as he was heading back to the depot anyway. He told the woman that he would drop her off at a particular road in the city center as he was heading off to the office. The rest of the journey was uneventful for Peter. He occasionally looked in the mirror to see if the lady was okay and had stopped crying. Peter was nearing the road where he told the young girl he would have to drop her off. As Peter opened the doors for her to leave, there was no sign of her movement, so Peter, believing her to be asleep, walked down the whole bus to see if he could awaken her. To his utter horror, there was no one else on the bus. In a state of complete shock, Peter drove back to the depot and called for assistance as he could not believe what happened, and he was absolutely shell-shocked. Over the next few days, Peter's story started to spread, and it became apparent that years earlier, a young woman of the mysterious passenger's description had been knocked over by a car in the same area that Peter had picked her up. The story went that she had just seen her boyfriend, and they had an argument. She ended up going home heading for a bus rather than letting her boyfriend drive her home. As she walked to the bus stop crying, she is alleged to have walked into the road in oncoming traffic. She was sadly killed outright by a car. The actual time of Peter picking up the young lady was said to be the anniversary of her death. What I do know is that Peter never worked again whatsoever, and as for the young woman, she is said to walk the county lanes of Durham, searching for a lift towards Durham City Center. Hey guys, Phantom here. And he's brought merch. That's right guys, I've set up a merch place for you guys to get merch. What is merch, you say? Well, it's an abbreviation and everybody's annoyed by it. No, it's merchandise. And what we are doing is we are selling shirts for you guys to enjoy. Links will be offered in the description below, but it's basically going to have my logo on it. And if you guys like that kind of stuff, it comes in a variety of colors. So if you want to support my channel, go ahead and purchase a shirt and let me know how it looks when it turns out and you actually get the package in the mail. And hopefully nothing weird will happen while you get a package or you're waiting for an iPod or something like that, and these transparent figures are going to go after you. Anyway, guys, just going to wrap this up, but please comment, like, and subscribe to this channel if you haven't done so before. Like I've always stated before, the comment section of YouTube is where I love to interact with you guys. And I love just the interaction, just see your comments. So give me as many comments as possible. I want to see at least 100 comments or more. I mean, that's usually the norm, I guess, for my channel, if it's successful. But, you know, I'd like to see at least a few comments because I want to talk to you guys. I want to have a discussion with you guys, you know, and have you guys actually really enjoy what's going on this video. So that's why, obviously, you know, I ask for the comments every time because I love the comments and it's, you know, amazing thing. And it helps the channel grow because if people see a bunch of comments, they're like, oh man, this guy's awesome. And then they'll subscribe. I mean, that's my reasoning. That's my stupid reasoning. I'm not sure if that's entirely true, but that's what I'm thinking. So yeah, guys, just go ahead and comment, like, subscribe, share, of course. And I know I sound so redundant every time I ask for this, but I'm just going to leave the video at that because I have a door that I want to walk through because I'm a ghost and that's what phantoms do. Adios. Love you so much. Good night.